Okay, start. Right, so we've done the detailing, we've done the blocking in. Now we're going to do something called render setup. For those of you that don't know, rendering is basically making the image that you see in the viewport into the final image. Okay, we can demonstrate this by quickly pressing render here. So it makes a new image here, which is very small. And what it does, it makes it look nice, basically. Whereas the real-time viewports, it looks basically like a real-time 3D graphics viewport. Although, having said that, real-time, the quality of real-time viewports are getting better and better. In the new version of 3D Studio Max 2015, it's actually really good. So there might be a time when, you know, real-time viewing is all we need. But for now, to make things look particularly nice, we need to render the scene. And what we do to set up the rendering, we go to the menu panel, press render setup, and this gives you a whole lot of different options. If you're new to 3D Studio Max, this might seem a bit daunting again. What I want you to do is go to Common first, select this Common tab, yeah. Go to the bottom and you're going to assign a renderer. So click on this plus box, go to Production, Default Scanline Renderer, it says there. I don't want you to use this because this is a very old style of renderer, yeah? It was used in 3D Studio Max years ago. You can still use it, it's okay, but go onto this box and choose renderer, and I want you to click on NVIDIA Mental Ray and press OK. So now it's the rendering system, or the rendering machine, whatever you want to call it, is now Mental Ray. And why is Mental Ray important to use? Well, to start with, Mental Ray has something called global illumination. So whatever you light in the scene, it will simulate the real world. In the real world, light bounces. So, for example, if light's coming from this corridor, this space between skyscrapers here, and it'll hit the floor. Unless the floor is a very, very dark material, it will reflect something, okay? And it will reflect or bounce light back onto nearby objects, such as this wall here. And this is what global illumination does. It basically bounces the light for you, so it simulates the real world. There are also other things that it can do, but for now, just think of that. So now we have the render setup box and we have the Mental Ray setup. I want you to go to Global Illumination, click on that tab, and ignore these settings. Sometimes it can be quite confusing, but don't worry, you're just looking for some particular things, and once you know the particular things, the other things are not really important. So you go to Final Gathering, enable Final Gather, and enable Photon Mapping, which is GI, and press enable that, okay? So that's your Mental Ray setup. I want you to make sure your rendered frame window is open, and it should be here. And you'll see the window with the render here is open with lots of settings here that are quite useful as well. I want you to go to FG bounces to 2, and that's it, okay? But I also want you to make this render larger. So I want you to go to Common, no, not Common, Renderer, sorry. Oh, no, I always, oh, right. I want you to go to Common again, okay, right. So Common, and we have the output size. Remember I changed that to Panavision Cinema. Panavision Cine. So we have a nice film cinematographic composition, which is a long landscape. And at the moment it's 440 by 200. This means 440 pixels by 200 pixels. This isn't very good because if you think about it, the YouTube video you're watching is at least 720 pixels wide, depending on the setting you have. Okay, so a good one for viewing your image is 1024 by 465. This isn't the final size. The final size will be something larger because it's going to be printed on an A3 sheet, so I'm going to set it up for that. But for now, 1024 by 465 is okay, right? And basically, I want you to click render now, just to test. And there are no photon emitters in the scene. So that's given a warning, which is okay because we're going to change that later on. So as you can see, it's rendered a larger area. The rendering still is very boring and flat because there's no lighting in the scene yet, and we haven't set that up yet. But we're going to do that next, okay? So now we've set up the mental array system, and I'd suggest you have a pause now, and I'll just pause for to get some breath, and then we can continue. And next we will set up the sunlight system, which is quite fun. Okay, speak to you in a minute. Hello again after the break. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, as I said, set up the daylight system. So I'd suggest go to your top viewport. If it's wireframe like this, press F3 if you want to see it. Okay. F4 to give it edged faces. I would enlarge that viewport. Okay, and go to Command Panel and go to Systems here. There's two cogs. Press that and go to Daylight. Now I always get confused. I've been using this for years now, but daylight simulates the daytime. Sunlight just simulates the sun. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So click on Daylight, and it comes up with a warning message. You are creating a daylight system. It is recommended that you use the MR photographic exposure control to set an exposure value. So click yes, because I'll explain this in a minute. Now left click drag. This is your compass. Okay, I'll do that again because it's very large. Take it off daylight. Okay, compass, left click, then click left off, and then drag the sun. This shows you the distance the sun to the compass. Okay, this isn't actually that important, but try and get it quite a far way from where you are. So click on the compass and move it about here. And as you'll see, the compass has west, east, and this is north, and that's south. We can scale it down a bit so we can see it more easily. North, east, south, west. And I remember I could simulate this. What I'm trying to say is this daylight system simulates daylight, okay? So it's really cool. And when I was walking in New York, I remember this particular view. Central Park was behind me, and this was walking towards central Manhattan, I think it's what it's called, and then downtown and everything like that. So that's actually kind of pointing south, I think. So for now I'm going to rotate the compass about this way, all right? And then I'm going to select the daylight. So now it's kind of simulating what the position would be in real life. To make this more accurate, you can use things like Google Earth as a reference. You can grab the image off Google Earth and use it as a reference in your scene. But don't worry about that too much. This is just an art piece, to say, and we're trying to make it look good, not simulate real life. So click on this sun icon, and I want you first to go to Modify. Okay, and check there for daylight parameters, and I want you to, on the sunlight daylight parameters, you have to collect mental ray sun, and then the skylight mental ray sky. So this, in this again, you've created a mental ray sky. It is recommended you add a physical sky environment map. Do you want this to be done automatically? So press yes, and that's going to add a nice sky to your scene. Right. Now I'm going to take back to the main cam view, minimize that, let's use this compass here. Oh dear, this plugin, there's nothing wrong with this plugin, it just opens because I put it on the quad menu here, so I'll take it off. Right, so as you can see, we've got the lights set up here. In this viewport here, I want it to simulate what the render is going to look as much as possible. So go to this, right click and click on realistic. This should change the viewport to a more realistic view. Sometimes it doesn't work so much depending if your graphics card is playing up, but that's quite a nice view there. Okay. And what you can do is spin the compass around, and then it will show you the shifting of the light, which is really nice again. And I'm going to take you now to the panel called Environment. That's very important. So click on Environment. And I want to show you this. So because this simulates real life, when we render it without these exposure controls, it will be very, very bright. So we need to also simulate the camera exposure control to more of a real life setting. So the best way to do it is mental ray photographic exposure control, active. Don't process the environment background maps yet, and press render preview. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. It's taking a while to even make the preview there. Okay, so you can see very, very slightly in this small image here what it could look like, what the final render here might look like. And it looks very blue because we've got the sky now as well. What I'm going to do now is go to the sun, and we're going to go to motion, and this is a really good thing as well. So click on the motion, and it will tell you the time. Now, when I was there, it was about, I think the time was about 9 o'clock. No, I'm wrong. I think it was about 10 o'clock. But I'll take it down to 9 o'clock, see what it looks like. And I'm going to render preview it again. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is render it. So I'm going to probably pause this and then start it again when it's finished, okay? So I'll start rendering now. And as you can see, we have quite a nice render happening. The magic is starting to work with the 3D now. After all your efforts, it's looking quite good. And as you can see, this blue in the background is the physical sky. Remember that message that came up, and it's been placed in your environment settings here, and it makes a nice simulation of the physical sky. Okay, here. You can do certain things with that as well, but that's for another day, because I'm not actually going to really use the physical sky in this final artwork. Great. And what you can do now is I'll give you another demonstration. So that's at 9 o'clock. We can take the time to much later on, near sunset, okay? So as you can see in the viewport, it's sunset and it's quite a bit darker. So remember, if you have any experience with cameras and exposure, you've got to make sure that the exposure is set correctly to the correct time. So let's simulate it again in the preview to see what it's going to look like. And it looks very dark. So what you need to do is just increase the exposure a bit, decrease the exposure a bit, and it'll show you a bit lighter. Okay, so I'm going to render this again, and you'll see how it goes then. Okay, render. Okay, start now. Right, so this is the render again. So now it's showing a more evening appearance, and it's got some really nice oranges going on. I love this time of evening when you get the orange lights falling on the building. There's kind of dappled effect here. This is really for another lesson, because it's not really relevant for this artwork. And as you can see in the background, the nice thing is in this horizon area, it's going a kind of orangey color that we associate with sunsets. Okay, so the sky is simulating a real-life sky. Unfortunately, it doesn't do clouds yet. You need plugins for that, but don't worry, because this piece we're creating doesn't need a nice clouds. Or we can use, if it's a 2D piece, we can always use textures as well. Even in a 3D piece, we can simulate clouds as flat planes with images mapped onto them. Okay, so we've done all this, we've done the lighting. Now I want to talk quickly about using the materials. Again, in the main toolbar, we go to Material Editor, click on that, and it will open up as this material editor. Actually, if you're using the later versions of 3D Studio Max, it will probably open up as the slate editor. This is a very powerful editor. It's very, very useful for ease of material editing, etc., etc. But I'm going to just take it to compact material editor for this occasion, because it's a bit simpler to use, and this course really many materials or textures. That's for another lesson, and the reason why I've said before is that the 3D is kind of the base sculptural structure, and the textures and the colors are added as in the 2D package, Sketchbook Pro. This is a good method, and it's quite a quick method, as you see, because I mean this scene hasn't taken me that long. If I was to texture everything in the scene, it would take an awfully long time, but that means that I could then animate it in 3D. Anyway, without going on too much, your material editor is here. We highlighted it by clicking these boxes, and I want you to click on Standard and just go to Arc and Design Material here. Click on that, and here it gives you a shiny material. Press Ctrl and A, so everything's selected in your scene, and assign material to selection here. So click on that. So now this material is assigned to all of this selection. This material is quite shiny, so I want you to take the reflectivity down, because shininess in real life is reflectivity, and 3D Studio Max simulates a lot of things in real life. So a lot of this voodoo stuff that you see in these settings that you might be daunted by. Often it's just ways to simulate real life. And if you're doing stylized 3D, sometimes you don't need to simulate real life. So we've got the reflectivity spinner, and we can take that down. And as we take it down, we can see in the viewport, the material view, that the reflectivity is kind of going. We take the glossiness down, and the glossiness goes. Yeah, you can see that go a bit. Take the reflectivity up a bit to give it a bit of sort of like a concrete shine. If I double click it, it'll enlarge. A kind of concretey shine, and the glossiness down. Bring up your rendered frame window, and as I said, select a region, because you don't really want to test a whole lot, it'll take too long. And make sure again that you've selected everything and applied the material to everything. And I'm going to press render in a minute. And the reason why I'm using a mental array material, it's A, it's good practice, and B, it does give a slightly nicer feel to the scene. And also, if you want to add special effects, you can do that here, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'll just hit render, and it shouldn't take too long, so I won't have to pause the video. Come on, so it says photon emission, so that this is working out all the simulation for you, okay? So there we go, it's rendering. And it still looks quite shiny, but for now it's okay, and I'll probably change the shininess when I do a time-lapse tweak later on. Okay, so that's rendered it quite quickly, and it's looking quite nice. Right, so the next thing I want to look at is the round corners effect and the special effects button here. Not all the materials have it. If you were to select a standard material, it doesn't have this, okay? So to click on round corners is a very, very useful command, because in the past, before this feature came in 3D Studio Max, any square corners would look very, very square. Now if you think about it, in real life, things are not completely knife edge sharp edges. For example, let's scale up this and look at this edge. There's nothing really in life that's that sharp. Even if you look at a sharp knife, close enough, it's not razor sharp. So what round corners does is it's kind of like a shader, and it simulates round corners on sharp objects like this. In the past, we would have had to, any objects we wanted to make more realistic, we would have to select them, you know, chamfer them, add segments, as many segments as we could, and then we'd have to do this to all the objects basically to make them look round. And this would cause great time lags in your scene, because the render time would take a lot more. I was a bit worried that I wasn't going to undo there, so I pressed Control and Z, nice little shortcut to take it back to what it was. So this rounds the corners. So at the moment it's 0.005 meters, which is about, yeah, that's half a centimeter, I think. So I'll increase that a bit, and you probably won't be able to see the results here, but I'll just render it. And again, it works out the final gather points. Okay, you probably can't see it here, but what I'm going to do is go close up to one of these lamps. Again, it's the backward and forward arrows are too much, so I tap the brackets again to take the increments down, so it's slower. Okay, let's find a sharp edge here, because as you can see, it says there's a warning on it. This strictly is a shading effect like a bump map, and it's only guaranteed to work on straight edges. So any edges that are kind of curved, it's not going to work. So I'm going to check this. So first of all, I'm going to take the round corner off. It's rendering nicely there. We've got a and as we can see, there's quite a sharp edge there. I'll just duplicate this so we've got a reference for the last render. Now I'm going to turn this on, and so I don't have to repeat it, I'm going to crank up the curve on it and also blend with other materials. If there were other materials in the scene, it would blend with the other materials in the object, sorry. So I'll just render it again and let's see if there's a difference. Come on, render. Okay, there doesn't seem to be a difference. I'm going to crank it up a lot more, the fillet radius, see if it makes a difference here. Is it going to do it? Is it going to do it? Yes. Thank goodness, because I would have had to have stopped and re-recorded. Okay, great. So you can see in the original image, it's a dead straight razor image. Now it's got this nice curved effect here. And you can see it happening on some of the other objects as well. I think this is slightly smoother. So it's a really great way to smooth, to make your scene a bit more realistic. There's another thing down here which is ambient occlusion. You can switch that on, but don't worry too much about that yet. That's for another tutorial. Basically that helps with your global illumination. It helps the realism in the scene. If you want to look into it, there are plenty of help files in Max and also some really cool YouTube tutorials about this. Okay, so that's the material, all the materials for you that we're going to use in the scene. I'll take this area to render back to that for later on. We're still in the main cam, unfortunately. I've zoomed with the main cam, so I'll have to place the main cam back to where it belongs. Around about here. I can fiddle around with that later. And that's it. So that's all your lighting and your materials. One other thing is I'm going to, for the final output, I'm going to render out a wireframe, but we'll look into that later because the wireframe is added to the final image and it looks cool, as you'll see in the final image when we develop that in Sketchbook Pro. Okay, well, speak to you in the next installment. And the next installment we're going to be using Populate, a really cool feature of 3D Studio Max to add people instantaneously, and we're going to look at layers finally. Okay, speak to you soon. Bye.